are the inheritors of a crisis they didn't create.
When I was 14 years old, I saw landslides killing so many people due to harsh weather conditions. These images have disturbed me and cannot allow me to rest until something is done about the changing climate.
Victims of the human exploitation of natural resources, making their homes unlivable.
We young people from Africa and across the global south are frightened, but we are here to tell leaders in the global north that they cannot get away with this. We cannot let these injustices unfold as they are. Children cannot eat coal, children cannot drink oil, children cannot breathe gas.
And they are the ones demanding change.
Your action today will decide our future tomorrow. My generation is already the victims of climate crisis. I don't want my future generations to face the same consequences because of the inaction and empty false promises. We want climate justice now and act now to save our planet and our future.
They are the youth, the next generation of changemakers. Welcome to CGTN America's Global Action Initiative 2022 on Sustainability. I'm Anand Naidu. According to the United Nations, there are some 1.2 billion young people aged 15 to 24. That's about 16% of the global population, and that number is expected to grow over the next few years. They are inheriting a planet dealing with a climate crisis, rising inequality, shrinking forests, and an ecosystem in peril. During this special program, we will hear from international leaders and a panel of youth who are demanding a more sustainable environment. We begin with Simon Steele. He is the Executive Director of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. He shares his thoughts about the urgency young people feel about taking climate action.
They're right. There isn't enough action and there isn't enough urgency. So their voices are valid. And, you know, they need to continue to make their voices heard. But the bottom line, 2030 is just around the corner. It's 8 years away. That is 2 World Cup finals. That's 2 Olympic finals. It's just around the corner. So the focus, global focus, has to shift to what is right in front of us. And I keep saying, you know, the prescriptions are there. We know what needs to be done.
Next, we have Gustavo Manrique, who is Ecuador's Minister of the Environment, Water and Ecological Transition. He defines what sustainability means to him.
Hi, my name is Gustavo Manrique. I'm the Minister of Environment, Water and Ecological Transition. I'm very glad to be part of the Global Action Initiative. I want to share with you what is sustainability for me. Sustainability is the perfect balance between social, environment, and economic. Imagine a society very rich, but threatening our natural resources. Or imagine a society with a lot of initiative conserving the natural resources, but not having wealth. Or being wealth, conserving the natural resources, but not paying good to the society. So we need to create that balance. It doesn't justify any wealth by destroying nature. But you can live poor with the richest nature. We need to find the balance between all that aspects in order to guarantee at least the same resources for future generations.
To continue our coverage, let's bring in our panel. Joining us from Guizhou, China, Zhongshu is a PhD candidate of hydrology and water resources at Tsinghua University. From Beijing, we're joined by Wang Xinlu. She is a PhD candidate of hydro-environmental engineering at Tsinghua University. From South Africa, Yenziwe Imbuyisa is a postgraduate student of botany and zoology from Stellenbosch University, South Africa. And from Israel is Naman Kapoor. He is a third-year undergraduate student at Sciences Po in Paris. All of our guests are ambassadors from the Global Alliance of Universities on Climate. Welcome to all of you. Zhongshu, let me start with you. You are studying hydrology and water resources. What got you initially interested in this particular branch of environmental science?
That is a very interesting question. As for why I choose the major, I think a big part of the reason is my personal experience in my hometown in Guizhou province in China. You know, my hometown is surrounded by mountains and water and was very rich in natural resources. However, historically, there have been many problems with the sustainable use of natural resources. In Guizhou, for example, the karst landscapes made up about 74% of the land area, resulting in serious local rock desertification and thin soils that cannot retain water. And it has also led to poor water storage capacity in the watershed, with about 70% of precipitation lost during the rainy season and limited draining to cope with events such as extreme droughts. And also the long-standing engineering water shortage has been a major shortcoming limiting the development of my hometown. And during the decade growing up in my hometown, I constantly saw the local people making efforts together on improving living conditions by building septic tanks and drains. In recent years, for example, every household has been provided with running water and farmland water conservancy facilities as well as constructed. And this made me realize that water conservancy construction can promote the economic development of my hometown and enable the elderly to get out of poverty.
Okay, great. Wang Xinlu, your focus is on the impact of hydropower construction on the Yangtze River. What got you particularly interested in this project?
For me, it is kind of the combination of my own interest and the research project of our PhD research team. First, basing on my previous experience of the field trip, I'm lucky enough to have the chances to go abroad, like to the Ecuador, Laos, and Malaysia, and to do the field trip, like to see the reservoirs and dams construction. And also it aroused my great interest in the nature and the beauty of the water. So I have grown the interest in the fluid mechanics and the ecology issues. Besides, I know that the Yangtze River is of great importance, both in terms of the geographical location, the scope of influence. So it is very meaningful to keep the study on the Yangtze River. Besides, I got the opportunity to the field trip in the Yangtze River with the guidance of our research group. So especially on the Yangtze River, the upstream of the Yangtze River, I do the field trip and also to collect the data about the water quality and phytoplanktons. So when I sit on the boat on the Yangtze River, I really get interested in the beauty of the nature.
Yenziwe, you are in South Africa and you're currently pursuing a graduate degree. You're studying the effects of temperature on water efficiency. And of course, we remember very vividly the water crisis in South Africa just a few years ago in the city of Cape Town, when very serious restrictions had to be placed on consumers of water because of very low levels. What led you to this particular area of study?
I think that mostly my project actually looks at understanding tree species better. So it's a comparative study comparing an invasive species or maybe an exotic species, Eucalyptus grandis, which is the most forested tree species in our South African forest plantations, and I'm comparing it to a native tree species. And basically, this project was designed in response to global tree planting initiatives that are pushing for afforestation products as afforestation projects as a means to sort of sequester more carbon. And there's a huge buzz around Africa even committing close to 100 million hectares of its landscapes to plant all these trees. And particularly in South Africa, we are a very water scarce country as is, and we face some dire situations that the whole world even saw when the whole day zero scenario happened in Cape Town. And so I just want to investigate that. Is it worthwhile investing in all these afforestation projects that could lead us into planting a lot of exotic trees that use a lot of water and can put us in a place that's not better off than where we are now? Or should we rather focus our energy on looking at our native species and species that will actually be beneficial for our biodiversity, beneficial for our landscape and the type of environment that South Africa is in? What happened in Cape Town a couple of years ago was an amazing example of what can be achieved if we put our resources together. That's our research resources, our policy, and just take action towards making sure that we secure our resources, we secure our biodiversity, and we're very conscious of how we use our natural resources.
Naman Kapoor, your area of expertise is the connection between finance and climate change. That, of course, is a very important nexus. We know that vast investments would have to be made to put the brakes on climate change. How did you get involved in this area of study?
I'm a student of policy and people, and I was studying inequalities back at Sciences Po, and one of our classes was focused on climate change, and we were trying to understand who it impacts and how much. And we realized that the people that have contributed the least to climate change, that are mostly people from the developing world, get the highest amount of effects of climate change. What I realized was at that time that we need to go back to the first principles and think because a lot of academics would tell me that we already have the solutions to climate change. So I decided to find out what the bottlenecks were to solving this crisis. And where I put my spot on was finance. That even though we have the solutions, we don't have the money to finance those solutions. And so during the Climate X project, we decided to my team and I decided to build a project that was aimed at channeling funds from investors to green projects. And during the creation of this project is when I actually had to study a lot, and I developed this knowledge base of climate finance.
See, Jong-Soo, as I said, you're studying hydrology and water resources. What are some of the sustainable solutions you have come across in your research?
I just mentioned some examples of how local people in my hometown are coping with extreme events, but how to deal with this disaster sustainably is a much deeper question. And my research focus right now is the impacts of compound extreme events on terrestrial ecosystem and the nature-based solutions over it. There is now a consensus that global warming and other issues arising from climate change are leading to unprecedented threats to human society, and the intensification of extreme events caused by global warming is leading to an increase in hazards to global ecosystem from the disasters they cause. And whether we look at the historical results given in the IPCC reports, for example, or the recent series of real-life compound events caused by global warming, their frequency is increasing and the accompanying hazards are often greater than those of a single event. So in this case, the nature-based solutions are very, very needed. Like in terms of mitigation, it can assist in the setting of renewable energy based on spatial planning for biodiversity conservation, avoiding biodiversity-rich areas, as well as increasing carbon sinks in ecosystems, and also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to improve biodiversity through the conservation and the restoration.
Wang Xinlu, being informed about the climate crisis, of course, also means getting out in the field. Talk to us about hydro-environmental engineering and how that plays into sustainable outcomes.
As far as I'm concerned, the hydro-environmental engineering and the climate change are really closely related, and also the sustainable development. I think we need to find a synergetic solutions to solve all the problems, and they are the problems, but also the solution of other problems actually. So as for the Yangtze River, as we all know, it is the largest river in China and the third largest one in the world with diverse habitats and ecosystems. So it is very of great significance, and they are for the Yangtze River. It is actually located in the climate-sensitive zones and regions where human activities are highly frequent. For the Yangtze River, it has been made up the Yangtze River protection strategies, which are expected to improve the water quality and ecological function of the Yangtze River estuary. So why we should protect habitat and of the Yangtze River? Because there are on the Yangtze River, there are many habitats for numerous rare and endangered species, and also a large number of sensitive areas of national ecological environments. However, with the development of the economy and society, the biodiversity and ecosystem degradation of the river in recent decades have been particularly worrisome.
Jens Sizwe, you were telling us a moment ago that water is a scarce resource in South Africa. Of course, it's a vast country, but you also pointed out that there is a solution. There is a way for people to make more effective use of this scarce resource by pulling together. We saw that in the city of Cape Town not so long ago. So what have you learned in your work about water usage and water availability in South Africa?
I think that I've learned a lot that there's a lot that we can do as people to mitigate a lot of issues that we face in climate. And in terms of water use, I think people just need to be given perspective, like the right perspective, or the perspective that's more towards sustainability. And you can influence people's perspective mostly through policy. And that's exactly what happened in Cape Town. We were in a dire situation, and our leaders had to come together and draft policies that force people to change their perspective on how they use water, how they view water, and how conscious they are of it. And I think this just again emphasizes, I think Norman said earlier that he is a scientist of policy and people. And this emphasizes how you really need to work on the relationship and the synergy between how policy can govern the way in which we conserve our resources and we just make better decisions for our environment. And I think also this also stems to just looking at some of the measures that we've taken towards mitigating climate change generally. And I feel quite strongly on this point, and because it's also inspired the research that I'm doing now, and that's the whole concept of reforestation. And as we in 2020 we entered the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, and by all means we should be restoring our ecosystems. But I think in Africa we are in desperate need of understanding our ecosystems better, and we have the capacity, we have the intellect, we even have the infrastructure to understand our biodiversity and our ecosystems. The only thing is we need finance, and we need finance that can help us create more accessible water sources for people. We need finance to help us improve the livelihoods of people in rural areas, so that when we have a situation like we did, where water was such a scarce resource, that the most vulnerable communities are not placed in a position where they are literally on their deathbeds because we failed to incorporate a policy that would favor the people as well. And I think just segueing into how this also links into biodiversity, we often think of biodiversity as a natural entity, just nature and the environment, but people form such an important part of biodiversity, and we need to find a way that we can have this synergy between people and biodiversity, and have it through policy that can help us take better care and be better custodians of our resources, water being one of them as well.
Right, we certainly do need finance, and that has been central to the debate on the battle against climate change. Naman Kapoor, the availability of water in India has also been impacted by climate change. India has just accepted the presidency of the G20, where delegates are calling for, quote, water as the centerpiece of global sustainability. Tell us more about this effort.
Sure. So we are seeing one of the most erratic monsoon seasons that we've ever seen, and it's a direct threat to our water security. And it does not just stop there. Like Yenzi said, it has a ripple effect. It has a ripple effect on the sustainability of ecosystems, on human health, and it impacts the most vulnerable first. And that is the big issue there. I think India's climate action and India's climate leadership has been really inspiring and impressive. It is India's G20 presidency is a great opportunity for the world, because I personally believe that we can get a lot more done with 20 people in the room than 200. And these are the leading nations of the world. When they come together and the decisions they make impact the entire world. Prime Minister Modi's commitment to the environment looks pretty strong. It's also on India's primary agenda for the G20. So I'm very hopeful, I'm crossing my fingers that we'll get something out of it, some good results out of it.
Xi Zhongshu, there is an ambitious project which has been announced, and that is to save 30% of land and oceans by 2030. It's more commonly known as the 30 by 30 project. What kind of progress are you seeing to meet this kind of goal? I mean, are countries well positioned to meet this target?
Actually, we all know that as global temperature is rising, it is urgent to solve the global ecological and environmental problems. And what I know is that in recent years, many countries in the world have been advancing related tasks and cooperation. For example, in China, the government has built a system of nature reserves, mainly, for example, the national parks, by continuously promoting the construction of nature reserves and carrying out the pilot national park systems. And China has taken the lead to the international area in promoting and implementing an ecological protection red line system, identifying priority areas for biodiversity conservation and protecting important natural ecosystem and biological resources, and playing an active role in maintaining important species habitats. And as for whether countries are in a position to achieve this target, I personally believe that like the situation is that the around 30% target can only be achieved if all countries work together. Objectively speaking, only about 17% of the world's land area is currently under some kind of protection, and less than 8% of the global ocean area is protected. So I believe we need to emphasize the common but differentiated responsibilities, and that governments can really consider addressing structural inequalities in the economic system and strengthening cooperation and communication on ecological conservation.
Wang Xinlu, all of you were at the COP27 conference on climate change. What was the message that young people brought to that meeting?
I think it is our youth determination to combat and solve climate issues. We actually brought the open letters written by our youth ambassadors and sent them to different world leaders to convey our voice that as the future leader of the world, our youth do care about climate change and our motherland. Actually, we youth from different countries and continents, we really hope to solve this problem, and we really share for the shared goal. And we hope to draw the attention and advocate the world leaders to more focus on how to deal with climate change. And we need to, and we hope to offer innovative solutions and find the synergetic solutions for this topic. And we hope to give us more location and power and opportunities to get involved in the implementation of climate change.
Yenzi, China currently holds the presidency of the COP15 conference, and all stakeholders at that conference have been insisting that there be some kind of a Paris agreement for nature. That was, of course, a reference to the Paris Accords of 2015 on climate change. I mean, how crucial is it for there to be that kind of an agreement, and what are your hopes?
Well, just understanding what the Paris Agreement achieved, it was able to get countries and governments to commit, and to make commitments means that they were now held accountable and responsible for certain actions that their country or their nations would take. And that is very significant, because then that also influences how governments will then enforce policies, make decisions around how they can maintain or keep up to the commitments, or keep the commitment that they've signed up to. So it's very, very important, and I'm so glad that in COP15 that this is the main agenda, for people to try and make more of a commitment and take responsibility and accountability, because once they do that for nature, that means we can have better decisions made around how we can protect our natural resources, how we can protect our landscapes, how we can better learn and understand our biodiversity. There's going to be more investments into our biodiversity, which is absolutely necessary. The better we understand our systems, the better we can manage them. And it's very, very important that we start having this conversation where we want things to be down on paper. And as Shinglu said earlier, that when we were at COP27, we had an open letter that we presented to world leaders that were present at the conference. And we hoped that from that, we would get a written commitment from them stating how they would contribute or the efforts that they would make in response to our open letter. And I hope that from this COP15, we see a similar response where we get governments committing to taking action, like not passive action, but proactively pursuing better nature solutions, better conservation of biodiversity, and just the more incorporation of biodiversity into climate change discourse. So I really hope that from this, we really do get a lot of people signing down on a dotted line so that we can hold them accountable, so that we can be more geared up in terms of the actions that we want to take. And yeah, it's an exciting time. I think that COP15 is going to be just as exciting as COP27. I know a lot of people are not happy about the outcomes and achievements of these major conferences, but it's all these baby steps that we need to be so mindful of and how they actually make change. Nauman said earlier that he believes that 20 people can make a huge impact, and it's because they can make decisions, they can draft policies, they can help govern and lead people and change people's perspective.
Right, baby steps, as you say, but at least it's moving in the right direction. But the big question, of course, is money. Naman Kapoor, the United Nations estimates funds to fight climate change will be between $160 billion and $340 billion by the end of the decade, and that figure will go up to $565 billion by 2050. Now, you've just completed a project on climate finance. What did you find?
I found it to be very funny, actually. You know, commitments without accountability are nothing but buildings built on sand. And here, with the open letter, what we were trying to do is we were trying to get commitments and ask them to sign on a dotted line saying that this is what we're going to do, is because we have been getting commitments for a very long time. And I don't debate numbers because I don't really know, have enough expertise about them. But the numbers that you just quoted from the UN, those numbers could have been achieved if the commitments of the previous COPs were followed, like the 100 billion a year from the developing countries towards climate change. Those commitments have, they're not just off target, they're not even close. And that's the problem. In any negotiation, the most important aspect is trust between the two parties, the two partners that are negotiating. And there is, at COP27, when we were there, what I noticed was there is such a low trust environment. There are people who are really committed to doing things, and then there are people who are just there, and it's like a greenwashing of sorts of the image of every country, coming up to stages and making those comments and saying that, oh, yes, we'll do this. But if those commitments are not, if the leaders are not held accountable for their commitments, I'm not saying that if they fail to achieve it, but if they even don't try, that's my issue. So we need commitments, but we also need that element of accountability with those commitments.
And that's where we have to leave it. It has been an enlightening discussion. We have much more to bring you during our special programming, Global Action Initiative 2022 on Sustainability. And for more of our GAI content, you can check out our website or scan the QR code. I'm Anand Naidu. Ahead, the premiere of CGTN America documentary Sustainable in South and Southeast Asia.